Now on One, Inside Out for the East of England with David Whiteley.
It failed spectacularly. So what went so wrong with a contract to deliver healthcare for older people in Cambridgeshire? So how could such a high-profile and expensive contract go so wrong? Tom Barton has been finding out.
I've been looking at why this hugely important contract collapsed and what it means for the future of the health service in Cambridgeshire.
A Norfolk dog trainer takes us to Africa using the latest weapon against poachers. And how this 23-year-old turned his passion into Special Olympic standard figure skating despite having severe autism. Revealing the stories that matter closer to home. That's tonight's Inside Out. Hello, this week I'm in Norwich. Welcome to the programme. Now, when the NHS in Cambridgeshire signed a contract for older people's healthcare 2 years ago, it was the most expensive in the history of the health service. But it failed. Tom Barton investigates why it went so wrong and what harm has been done to the health service as a result.
This is Jack. Do you remember he came yesterday to see you?
Yes, I did.
Hi, Jim.
Hello,
Just going to check you over again just to see how you're doing today.
Right.
76-year-old Jim Noble has a high fever and this morning also had a fall. Normally, someone his age, in his condition, would be taken to hospital. But instead, today, Jim is being seen at home in St Neots by Jack, a trained paramedic from Cambridgeshire's joint emergency teams.
You just turn to face me, that's it. Push your hearing aid into your head, wouldn't I?
These teams, saving older patients from unnecessary hospital stays, are a real success story, despite the fact that the project that set them up has now collapsed.
The joint emergency teams are one of the few things to have survived from the Uniting Care Partnership, a massive contract to provide health services for older people in Cambridgeshire. It was worth £800 million and was supposed to last for 5 years. In the end, though, it collapsed after just 8 months, and a project which should have saved the NHS money ended up wasting millions. I've been looking at why this hugely important contract collapsed and what it means for the future of the health service in Cambridgeshire.
This video was produced to promote the project, and it was a pretty good idea, bringing together the different parts of the system that looked after older people in Cambridgeshire. That should have made it better for patients and also cheaper to run. And according to this Cambridge University health expert, the area's health service desperately needed to save money.
In about 2 to 3 years, they had to just decrease their costs by about £250 million. So when you just think about that much of the pressure that you have in the system, they had to do something really very creative, and they had to do something very big.
That creative solution saw two NHS trusts, the one which runs Adam Brooks and Cambridgeshire's Mental Health Trust, joining forces to form a company called Uniting Care Partnership. That company was then given this massive contract to look after the health of the county's elderly population.
But very quickly problems started to emerge. Within a month, Uniting Care had gone back to commissioners to ask for more money. A lot more money. The contract was supposed to be worth £160 million in the first year, but Uniting Care asked for an extra £20 million. That, over the course of the contract, would have taken it from almost £800 million to nearly £1 billion.
Dr. Erhun helped write one of the reports into what went wrong.
Given that the contract was signed without having some idea of what the total value is going to be, that's absolutely mad.
But commissioners didn't agree to the extra money, and at the start of December 2015, after just 8 months, Uniting Care said it was close to going bust and couldn't afford to carry on doing the work. A few days later, the contract collapsed.
So how could such a high-profile and expensive contract be allowed to fail so spectacularly? Well, big, expensive contracts are extremely complicated to put together, and whether you're in business or in the NHS, they often rely on expert advisors. The problem is that some of the advice that the NHS received on this contract contained some pretty big mistakes.
Key to ensuring that the NHS commissioners had all the expert advice they needed was the Strategic Projects team. It had been relied on to help put together some of the biggest contracts in the health service. And it did have successes, like setting up the Friends and Family test to monitor patient satisfaction. But when it came to the Uniting Care contract, key details were missed, like VAT.
If you or I buy something from a business, say a coffee for example, we pay VAT. So this coffee would cost about £2.40, but of that, 40p goes straight to the government in tax. Now, if one part of the NHS buys something from another part of the NHS, then they don't pay VAT. But if the NHS buys something from a business, then they do. Now, although Uniting Care was owned by two NHS trusts, legally it was a private company, and that meant VAT was due. The problem is that no one took account of that when commissioners and Uniting Care agreed a price, and that added £5 million to the bill in the first year alone.
These top advisors also failed to pass on some key legal advice that would have protected the commissioners if Uniting Care went bust.
On top of all of that, the Strategic Projects team failed to check whether Uniting Care could deliver everything it had promised for the price which had been agreed. As it turned out, they couldn't.
As a result of the Uniting Care disaster, NHS England closed the Strategic Projects team down last year.
Look East can reveal that the consultant team at the heart of those plans is being scrapped.
The team's most senior advisor on the Uniting Care contract was this man, their commercial director, Martin Peat.
I can reveal that when Martin Peat was working for the Strategic Projects team back in 2012, his own business went bust. That company, Martin Peat Consulting Limited, was wound up by this High Court order which declared it insolvent and unable to pay its debts. The reason? The company owed the taxman, HM Revenue and Customs, more than £40,000.
So the man overseeing the process of awarding the biggest contract in the history of the NHS was someone who it seems was unable to stop his own company from going bust, leaving the taxpayer thousands of pounds out of pocket. We put these points to Martin Peat and he told us he had no statement to make. NHS England told us that the Strategic Projects team's role in the contract was restricted to the process of procurement, and that the Clinical Commissioning Group led the contract and made decisions based upon advice from auditors and lawyers.
The doctor again is happy that we're going to come back tomorrow.
So am I.
Good.
More than happy.
Yeah.
Today, Jim has been told he can stay at home. This is better for him and better for the health service. One of the biggest impacts of the collapse of Uniting Care has been the lack of money to invest in similar teams working in the community. To find out how this has had an impact on patients, I sat down with the woman whose job it is to manage the area's health budget.
If Uniting Care hadn't fallen apart, what more would you be able to do today that you're not doing?
I do think that the pace of us developing things like specialist diabetes and respiratory teams in the community has been slower than it would have been. We haven't moved as quickly as I think we would have done if the Uniting Care contract had been successful.
And so there have been parts of the health system in Cambridgeshire where what patients would have expected hasn't come to fruition because you just haven't had the money to do it.
I think it hasn't come to fruition as quickly as we would like it to have done.
Hi Jackie, it's Maria in triage.
Yeah, all done with the last patient.
As Jack heads off to see his next patient, there is already evidence that this team is a success. But how much more could have been achieved if the project which set up the joint emergency teams hadn't failed? And what could that have meant for patients across Cambridgeshire?
Well, if you think there's something we should be looking into on the programme, you can get in touch with me on Twitter at David_Insideout or email david.whiteley@bbc.co.uk. This is Inside Out for the East of England here on BBC One. Later on, the ice skating superstar from Peterborough you've probably never heard of. It's a sad fact that this far into the 21st century, there's still a demand for rhino horns, and poaching is still a massive problem in parts of Africa. Well, Debbie Tubby has spent the last year following the dogs being trained here in Norfolk to protect the rhino and other animals.
These are the latest weapon in the fight against the poachers in Africa. They're being trained by Darryl Pleasance from Norfolk. He's dedicating his life to saving endangered animals that could otherwise be extinct in less than a decade.
We're losing out in Africa about 100 elephants a day, 3 rhino a day, we're losing a ranger a day, a lion a day to poaching. So it's an epidemic, with rhino horn fetching upwards of 60,000 a kilo. You know, one horn can be worth up to $250,000. Stop! Oh boy! We wanted to train a dog to the British police standards because effectively poaching is a crime scene.
For the first time, the dogs are going to be trained in Norfolk so he can monitor their progress. But will his latest recruits make the grade, and will they stop the poachers?
It's animals saving animals. You know, humans have been trying to do it and we failed. So let's put the animals out and let's help animals helping animals.
A former keeper at a local zoo, Darryl has always lived in Norfolk, and for years he was a military dog trainer and instructor.
I think it's quite an irresponsible attitude to turn around and say, you know, I want to save the world, I want to make a difference, because no one person can do it. As a team, across the broad spectrum of conservation, we've all got to do our part.
In August 2015, Darryl selects brothers Beau, Rogue and Polaris from the same litter. They're Belgian Malinois, chosen for a privileged role. From just 12 weeks, Rogue and his brothers have been learning to track so they can sniff out weapons and even ivory on a person. It's hoped they'll follow in the footsteps of Darryl's other dogs. Some are protecting these, the planet's last 3 remaining northern white rhino. It's 6 months since we last saw Beau and Rogue. They're no longer puppies, and they're checking into Norwich Airport for their next stage of training. They need to learn to acclimatise to an EC-120 helicopter, similar to the one they'll use while working in the African bush.
We're going to rehearse in and out here now, then we'll go outside, start the engine up and do the same thing, just the rotors running. And then, if that goes well, we'll go for a quick circuit with the aircraft and prove the point that they're airworthy animals.
Darren Priddle, a dog trainer who's helping Darryl, uses a tennis ball as an incentive to get Beau on board. But it's unnerving when it's the first time he's seen a helicopter. Eventually they face the aircraft with the rotors turning and the downdraft. This Norfolk helicopter company is doing this for free, but it still costs £5,000 to train each dog.
I have no doubt whatsoever both these dogs will now enter a helicopter or a plane quite happily.
These are only 9 months old, but they've been trained to be like a family pet. Now, if I just stand back a minute, they can change very quickly.
And you wouldn't want to meet Diego on a bad day either. He's one of 17 dogs Darryl has already trained in Africa. He wants his latest recruits to be up to this standard. Diego faces poachers armed with AK-47 assault rifles, with speeds of 30 miles per hour and a bite like a hydraulic press. There is no chance of escape. And because he's so fast, he's unlikely to be shot.
They're wearing armour, and whereas a human being, as he's moving through the ground, you have a front profile. With a dog, you only have a side profile, and with the armour as well, we've never had a problem. We've never had a dog that's even been injured operationally in the Call of Duty.
Maria wasn't so lucky. Shot 17 times by poachers, her horn hacked off while she was still alive. Her baby was less than a week old. Maria died in Zimbabwe